Peace and blessings, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Conversations with Asia of 2022. I am your host, Asia Nissia Shahid, where our mission here on this show is to empower the women of our communities and the girls that they are raising. I am so happy to introduce this particular show with all the hype that has come, about it, and that is raising healthy teenage daughters. I knew that it was a topic that was really important, but when I posted it up and when I started sharing that this was going to be the first episode of this year, it was an overwhelming response. And so this is a topic that I'm so excited to have. And we have our guest here. Everybody, if you don't know Sabria, I don't know what planet you've been on. We have our guest, Sabria, who is the creative owner of the show, the podcast, the Dope Muslim Woman Podcast. She is a behavioral therapist, and I'm just so excited to have her on the show. She is doing some wonderful things in the community in alignment with exactly what we're going to be talking about today, and that is raising healthy teenage daughters. Welcome, Sabria, to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you, sis.
Thank you so much. I see all the great work you're doing, and I'm just like, all right now, I love it. I love the things that you're doing, and we're going to be talking more about that as we continue with the show today, because I think it's something that a lot of the women and the young girls that are tuning in tonight is going to be interested in seeing their journey of becoming healthy or healthier. And that's the whole goal of what we're doing, because if we have healthy girls and healthy mothers, we have a healthy ummah, a community. And so I'm so excited to have this discussion with you. So
Absolutely,
sorry. I mentioned, that's okay. I mentioned to everybody that you're a behavioral specialist. So tell the audience a little bit about what is a behavioral specialist, because or therapist, that's what you said, behavioral therapist. And I know when you told me, I was like, what exactly do you do? So please tell those, those that are tuning in, what does a behavioral therapist do?
Well, I work in the realm of behavioral analytics, and that's when we get to really unpack and analyze behavioral patterns, and how behavior is sort of birthed and formed in the brain. And so we get to do the fun jobs of working to help modify dysfunctional or maladaptive behavior as the patterns are kind of sort of being birthed in children. I work specifically with the population of kids, and I work in the school setting, but I also have worked in the clinical setting as well. And so we specialize with individuals that may have particular disabilities where their behavior is impacted as a result of their disability. So that's sort of very strategic work. And we work in the realm of building really like these core, what we call core capabilities, these core skills within kids, the ability to be able to connect, the ability to be able to build like executive functioning skills, the ability to be able to sort of communication skills, all these things we are absolutely building and being really intentional about developing sort of healthy behavioral patterns in children. So that's what I tend to do. And I also work as a behavioral coach. And as most people know, I'm known as the behavior coach, and I have a lot of adult clients as well. So same rules apply.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's exactly why I was like, she has to come on the show. And if anyone doesn't know, she runs an amazing podcast. As I mentioned before, you got to remember this name, the Dope Muslim Woman Podcast. And although the title says a Dope Muslim Woman Podcast, it is for anyone. It's for any woman that really is looking for empowerment, looking to have those hard discussions. The sister has those discussions that most people want to shy away from. So please tune in, follow her, Sabria Mills. So let's get into this conversation about raising healthy teenage daughters. So I want to ask you, you have daughters yourself, correct?
I have 3 daughters, yes.
You don't even look like you have any daughters.
They keep me young, surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah. So you not only have, your profession that helps you to be able to understand behaviors and understand how the brain functions, the communication or lack thereof, but you're also raising daughters in real time. So I have one daughter myself. She's grown now, but I had to go through those teenage years as well. So getting right into what we're talking about, when we use the word healthy, healthy, in raising healthy teenage daughters, what does that encompass to you? What does that look like for you as someone who has that profession and have worked with children?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So when I think about healthy, we're thinking about developing sort of really balanced behaviors in our kids, ones that allow children to be able to go through all the stages of the development in a really healthy, functional way. And so ensuring that our children are able to reach all the stages of emotional development and they're able to manage their emotions, notice their emotions. They have their offer and their needs are met in a safe manner. And so when you're
Yeah.
looking at any individual, if they're healthy and balanced, this is an
Mm-hmm.
individual who has their primal needs met, those early needs that we're supposed to meet in very early
Yes.
years. In addition to that, we also have those, like I mentioned before, what we call core capabilities. So these are some skills that help us really regulate and manage our lives. Again, executive function, those basic day-to-day skills, communication skills, self-regulation, the ability to regulate ourselves, our impulses, and understand the realm of like accountability and empathy. And so all these sort of are traits and skills that would normally develop if a child was being developed in a really healthy, functional home. But as we know,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always occur that way. And so a lot of these skills have to still be intentionally taught to our children. But these are our
Absolutely.
balanced kids that have all the skills in order to manage their own lives.
Right, right. So you just described in such an eloquent way of what healthy actually looks like. So this is a child who's balanced, a child who is able to experience what they're feeling and be able to communicate that to those that are around them in a safe environment, be able to understand what they're feeling, what does that feel like, and not be made to be shamed because they feel a certain way. So,
Right.
what does it look like on the opposite spectrum of healthy? What do we notice? Because, and the reason why I'm about to ask you this question is sometimes, because we're so close in the situation, we're so close to our teenage daughters, they're in our home, we see them day to day, we've been raising them. Sometimes we don't see the signs. Sometimes we don't recognize the signs. So, what are the
Mhm.
signs? What are some of the signs, Sabria, that you would say depicts a young lady, a teenage, preteens, because it really starts at preteen is where I usually see it because I work with my nonprofit organization, Jessica Cares. It was going to be a teenage program starting at 13. And when we started it 11 years
Mm,
ago, we decided, you know what, we need to start with the preteens because it's starting that early. So it's that junior high
right.
school stage. What do you
Yeah.
see as some of the signs of a young lady who is starting to develop unhealthy habits internally, externally? What does that look like?
Oh, well, that could look like a variety of different behavioral traits or characteristics that we tend to see. With girls in particular, you may see anything from sort of like sullen or withdrawn behavior. That's typically a sign that there may be some suppression there, some emotional suppression happening. And anything that operates in the realm of suppression puts us in a really unhealthy space because
Yeah.
something there isn't sort of an internal imploding that tends to happen, and there are a lot of sort of needs that child may have that are not able to be met in that sort of space, and they don't have a place to freely emote and express, and they develop a lot of like sort of kind of unhealthy patterns around that.
Mm-hmm.
We also would see sort of very like aggressive, overt attention seeking behavior from teenagers at that
Mm-hmm.
point. And so let me dial
Mm-hmm.
this back before talking about the traits, if that's okay. So, what's really important to understand is that when our children are born, there are a particular set of needs that need to be met. So, first and foremost, their survival needs, or what we would call physiological needs, need to be met when an infant is born into this world. And so,
Mm-hmm.
they need to have food and feel warmth and all those sort of basic
Their
survival
basic
needs. They
need,
need
right?
basic needs, right? They need to be intact, right? If those are not intact, or that child is exploited in that area, or those needs are just simply unstable, then that child is unable to experience the other set of needs that would come in the hierarchy, which is like safety and belonging. And so our children also need to feel really safe, right? So what happens
Mm-hmm.
with a girl who's growing up who doesn't have a sense of safety? Perhaps she had inconsistent caregivers. Perhaps she had a mother or father that was in and out of her life. Perhaps emotionally she wasn't safe, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to think about it. Whenever we have these unmet needs, what happens is that we develop another set of behavior, which is called our self-protecting behaviors, in order to sort of cope and manage that really
Those coping
fundamental.
mechanisms.
Right, exactly. And so what we, in the realm of coaching, when I kind of coach clients through this, we talk about the inner child versus the outer child. So the inner child is
Right.
that inner innocent part of us that where, we are, all our primal needs have been met, and it's the child, that's able to be vulnerable and free and autonomous and creative and all of that. But if this is exploited, if that child is not, if those needs are not met, now I have to develop unhealthy self-protecting behaviors around me. So perhaps I'm
Mm-hmm.
aggressive, perhaps I decide to be really people pleasing and very compliant. We call this like compulsive compliance, where a child is really obsessed with compliance and being agreeable and a people pleaser as a means to cope. Is a self-protecting behavior that stems from
Mm-hmm.
the early pain of that need not being met. So those are some of the things that you want to pay attention to. And as parents, this is kind of like overwhelming to sort of kind of like
Yeah.
think about, like, oh my God, I met all my kids' needs. But at the end of the day, our children need to have, again, their survival needs intact. They need to feel safe. They need to know that they can trust you, that you are consistent, that you are dependable as a caregiver. And they need to know that they can connect with you and that love and acceptance exists with you, that they are validated,
Right.
that they have the space to be emotionally safe in a mode, and that they
Mm-hmm.
need these met. Otherwise, you'll have pretty self-destructive behaviors. And as I mentioned, like, the most common one in girls is people pleasing, fawning,
Yeah.
what we call. People pleasing is when you sort of are not expressing, you're completely compliant. A lot of our children, our girls, are subjected to being in abusive relationships or a product
Mm-hmm.
of abuse as a result of this very, very common self-protecting survival trait that we have around our unmet
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah. And sometimes those people pleasing is because they weren't validated. I
Yep.
found a lot of the girls, they didn't get validation. It was always what you didn't do right, but never any validation of what they did do right. So they're constantly seeking anyone that is going to validate them or give them some form of affirmation. Is that correct? Would you find that to be true as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we look at what reinforces behavior in the brain. And so when we're looking at the way a child behaves, so a child especially needs attention. And so if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not receiving attention through the positive means, in which that's where we should be offering our children, our daughters, a plethora of attention. And this is where I have an issue with the way the constructs of how a lot of our Black families, how the kind of cultural norms we have around raising children in the Black community in particular, because
Mm-hmm.
we go ham when our kids do something wrong, right? That's all the attention. We angry, we're turned up. But day to day, they do a plethora of things right, but we're dismissive, we ignore it, we don't acknowledge it, we don't
Yeah.
validate it.
Quiet.
You have literally reinforced in the brain, and this is happening whether the child can control it or not, and whether the human being can control it or not. You have reinforced in the brain that in order for me to obtain attention, I have to go do it through negative means. I have to do it through an unhealthy way, and I carry
Exactly.
that
Oh
into
my God. Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, I love what we're talking about because it's so common. And I think, sisters and those that are watching, and even fathers, if you're tuning in on the show and you have daughters, I really want you to, think, am I reaffirming? Am I affirming my daughter? Do I, when she wears her hijab, do we tell her she's beautiful, versus her seeking, validation outwardly? Are we affirming just, the fact that, okay, she didn't get an A, but you passed, you tried your best, you did well. are we affirming those type of things, and you gave up doing certain things just to try to pass that class, and I know it wasn't easy for you. So those are just some of the things that, would assist in affirming our daughters.
Right.
Sabria, one of the other things that, go ahead.
No. I wanted to just add, though, one of the things I had decided in recent years, and I'm really big on shifting some of these unhealthy norms that I grew up in a Muslim community that I saw, especially around raising daughters, some really unhealthy stuff where we're conditioning girls to be a subject of be in perpetual cycles of abuse, because in order for you to be deemed good or righteous, you have to be completely compliant and agreeable. This idea of nice and
Mm-hmm.
sweet, which there's nothing wrong with the characteristic trait of nice and sweet, but not the expense of self-exploitation. And so one of the things I've been very intentional about with my girls is removing control from that dynamic and relationship. We exist where we all operate in the space of boundaries. We don't violate each other's boundaries. They don't violate the boundaries of being in this home or the boundaries that mom has, which is a life skill, right? But I don't have the right to control them. I wasn't given that right just because they came out of me. Allah didn't give me that right.
Exactly. Oh, you jumped right into another. So I want us to revisit what you just said, because that was actually something that I wanted to talk about. Is that sometimes, because our children come out of us, they're not of us, and that's something that I want to address, because that does develop unhealthy behaviors. But before we visit that conversation, I did want to ask you, for young ladies, I myself, and I'm honest about it, I wrote about it in my book, I was molested as a child. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of young ladies will develop unhealthy behaviors, such as being promiscuous, because they feel like that's how I get attention. That's the only way that someone wants me, is because of that. What has been your experience working with girls, working with the youth and their behaviors as it relates to being exploited, as you mentioned, in that kind of way, which is, from a sexual standpoint, being innocent, having your innocence taken away? How does that affect a child mentally, and how do they depict that outwardly? Because again, I want our parents that are watching this show having that discussion with yourself, this reflective moment. Is my child expressing and showing and demonstrating these type of behaviors? So what does that look like for someone who has been abused or has had that form of trauma?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. And I think so many of us have had that shared experience. And, one of the things that happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created us, He created our bodies, our minds, our intellect, our emotions, everything with this sort of healing mechanism within us, right? And so that means that if I have a wound, the body's been designed to heal it, believe it or not, right? And so when we have a wound, an emotional wound or exploitation, an abuse that occurs on a subconscious level, what happens is that we tend to want to repeat the pattern, right? Or repeat the perpetual cycle of abuse, even if that means I'm going to constantly be sexually exploited. I'm going to seek out and allow all these boys to sexually exploit me, what we call promiscuous. I'm really at a subconscious level attempting to heal that wound, right?
Mm.
Because the idea is if I continuously repeat it, at some point, somebody's going to love me. We're going to fix this. Subconsciously, that's what's happening. We're
Mm.
designed that way, right?
Yep.
So somebody's gonna love me, somebody's gonna see me, somebody's not gonna exploit me, somebody's not gonna hurt me. So I'm gonna constantly repeat the cycle of abuse, and it's gonna get more and more extreme. I'm gonna look for people to exploit me even more, and it has to be more intense because I gotta fix it on a subconscious level.
Mm.
And that even speaks to, sis, how individuals who have experienced this early abuse, they end up with these relationships with abusive partners. You're still seeking to heal that early wound, right?
Yeah.
And we develop what we call compulsive behaviors. That's when we tend, in behavior analytics, we look at this idea of compulsive behaviors. And compulsive behaviors are these behaviors that we tend to have on repeat, and it's really difficult to stop. So now, as a
Mm-hmm.
means to cope, as a means to deal with that abuse and that pain, I have to have a compulsion around my behavior. I have to have this compulsive behavior. It's a way in which I cope with that early pain and wound. So perhaps I'm compulsively promiscuous, or I'm compulsively engaged in this act. Some people are compulsively compliant, where they allow themselves to continuously be exploited in that manner as well. And so it's really important as parents, when we're looking at these outward behaviors and we want to go into discipline mode, that we understand that every behavior is a communication. What
And
is
there's
your
a
child?
root to the behavior. There's a root to the
There's
behavior. It's
always
not just the behavior and meeting your child at the behavior. It's what happened before that is causing this behavior. Yes, yes,
Yes. And
absolutely.
just if you can look at it, I mean, that transforms parenting. If it's like, instead of seeing my behavior as something I have to punish or acknowledge or anything like that, I absolutely have to first understand, what is my child communicating through their behavior? If they're bashing in windows, what are they trying to tell me, before I deal with, managing the behavior? And so that's
Absolutely.
important.
And, and,
Yeah.
and something that I see, and it's something that was said to me, you're boy crazy. It's so easy to just deem it boy crazy, but is there something underlying? Why is this need to be attached all the time
Right.
to
Right.
someone of the opposite sex in particular? Why is there this need to be attached? And then the other thing that I noticed, Sabrina, I'm hoping that maybe you could shed some more light. It doesn't necessarily mean this compliance, wanting to be compliant has to be with the opposite sex. Sometimes, do you not see where young teenage girls are compliant even with their friends, even to a fault, where this you as a parent is looking like, this is not your friend, this is someone. My mother used to tell me that, that girl is not your friend, and I'm like, yes she is. And I was just like, I refuse to
Yeah.
want to hear that this affection that I was giving somebody wasn't reciprocated. So can you speak to that, on how it's not just the opposite sex that we see our children, our young girls in particular, being, this wanting to people please? It's even with
Mhm.
friends.
Right. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's a trauma response. We call this fawn. It's a trauma response. So again, as it relates to my trauma, and again, I'm exploited in the area of safety. That's the primal need that was exploited and unmet. And so I'm desperately seeking a sense of safety, right? And so again, this idea of, so I have a trauma response around it, and so I'm in an attempt to sort of keep myself safe. I gotta fawn, I gotta people please, I gotta do whatever it is people say, I gotta be super compliant. I have a compulsion around that, which means I absolutely can't stop.
Mm,
I absolutely have to do that in order for me to have some sense of safety within me, because safety
mm,
is a fundamental part of our survival, right? And so we have to develop a behavior around safety, even if it's dysfunctional and maladaptive. And so that's what we tend to see. And yeah, you're going to see compulsive, what we would call compulsive compliance. It does not matter with who. You're going to just see
wow.
that obsessive behavior of compliance and, yeah, people
So
pleasing.
to review, we have compulsive compliance, which is this people pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
way of being. And as you just brought out, and that we just discussed, is that it doesn't have to be with the opposite sex. It can be with either a friend,
Yeah, with the behavior.
platonic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a behavior, and that it's compulsive. And that's because there was something that was unmet as a child, right?
Exploited.
Or
Mm-hmm.
exploited, right? Or they weren't affirmed as a child. They
Yep.
didn't feel safe when they, express how they feel. You mentioned something that I find so intriguing, and I want us to dig a little bit deeper. And I think it does surround, in particular, the Black and Brown community, and that is the way in which we choose to discipline when our child demonstrates behaviors or ideals, or aspirations that don't necessarily fit our vision that we had for this child. How does
Absolutely.
that develop unhealthy behaviors within our young, teenage girls?
Yep. First and foremost, it when we as parents tend to have this idea that our kids are some sort of reflection of us and we live our way through our kids, and if they show a mistake, this is indicative of me and I've attached my sense of self and self-worth to my child, what
Mm,
happens is that we end up exploiting our children. And not only that, we
mm,
inappropriately attach ourselves to our kids. So it's this idea of like enmeshment, what we would call, and that's when we're completely enmeshed in our children. And I have no other, if I'm enmeshed, I have no other option but to control you. Okay.
mm.
I'm not acting, right? I'm controlling. That's the only, because I'm enmeshed, right? You are me and I am you. And I don't, and I'm struggling with controlling with what is within me. I don't have a great sense of control, which is why I have to sort of project on you, and my self-worth is attached to you. So now I got to control. If don't you dare make a mistake, or I'm going to physically harm you, right? Don't you dare make it. Don't you dare embarrass me, right? Wasn't that a big
Right.
construct in Black homes? This idea of being embarrassed, embarrassing your parents, right?
This
We had to
image,
hold
having to uphold this image, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep. It's all about, yeah. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead. I'm here to listen to you. I don't want the audience to hear you.
No, no, I was gonna say it's really all about this really inappropriate, like I said, inappropriate attachment. And again, like I said, when we don't have a good sense of self and our own self-worth, and as a Black community, we have to understand that we have cultural exploitation in the realm of having the need of worthiness met. Like we were exploited in the realm of self-worth. Our self-worth has always been under attack, just being Black in this country. So even if our parents try to do a phenomenal or bang up job with sort of affirming a sense of self or worth within us, we still have a societal or cultural messaging that says we're not worthy, we're not enough.
Right,
And so we're always going
right.
to struggle with that culturally. And so I'm doing all kinds of things to sort of mitigate or help myself regain a sense of self-worth, even if that means I'm going to attach my self-worth to this idea of I'm this ideal mom. I see this all the time, even within our communities. This unhealthy attachment to
Mm-hmm.
our children, that's not the amana, that's not the trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. He gave us a responsibility. We don't own them. We can't control them. We
Right.
can't exploit them. We can't harm them. And that's the amana and the trust. But, we just with switches and belts and extension cords, sis. It was a trip.
Oh yeah. And that's why I want to, dig a little deeper into that. So when we're talking, and this is kind of where I feel the crux, not that it's the only aspect of it, but I feel a large part in why we have unhealthy teenage girls is because, as you mentioned earlier, it's that child, that traumatized child is still in the parent itself and raising a teenage daughter. And so they almost live vicariously through their children. Like, I'm going to right the wrongs that happen in my life through my daughter. What do
Absolutely.
what does that look like? And I would love for you to give an example of what that looks like for a woman who is unhealed. What does that look like, and how does she transfer that trauma, that low self-esteem, sense of self-worth, that I have to be compliant, promiscuous, I have to be attached to someone to have meaning? What does that look like for that woman, and how she transfer that to her daughter? And what would you say to that mother?
Subhanallah. Subhanallah. The first thing I want to reiterate is that, and I'll get to the mom, but the father teaches the daughter how to receive. So when we look at as a woman, when we are in the receiving energy space, that's our feminine energy space. If we're really divinely present in our feminine energy space, we're receivers. We're cultivator. We take what we receive and we cultivate life from it, right? But the father teaches the daughter how to receive. So what does that mean? The father is responsible for solidifying the daughter's femininity. Okay. Now
Mhm.
the mother is responsible for solidifying the daughter's sense of self and identity. In the absence of a healthy mother being able to model, because we understand learned behavior, right? Able to
Right.
model a healthy sense of self and a strong sense of self identity, I'm not able to pass that down to my daughter. My daughter can't receive that from me. So now she
Because you
has to
can't
go
give
out.
what you don't have.
You cannot give what you don't have, right? No
Right.
blame or shame on the mom. Perhaps she didn't receive it
Right.
from her mother, right? These
Exactly.
are the patterns that we see and we pass down. So now the daughter is looking for her identity and her sense of self from her social constructs, right? And that's where you see this sense of self and this sort of idea of girls not really knowing who they are. They lack self-esteem, right? You see these major self-esteem issues, lack of self-confidence. It's because they did not receive that strong sense of self and self-identity. And again, this is not,
Mhm.
I don't want to blame or shame moms because
Right.
at the end of the day, like I said, you can't give what you can't receive. And there's a lot, and especially with Black mothers in particular, Black women have been the landing places of pain and trauma for since we've been here in this country. We thought it was our job to take on the trauma of our men, to take on the trauma of our community. We're the landing places for it. Bring it here and land it on our shoulders. So if I have these weights and these burdens and I'm emotionally depleted and I've annihilated myself in an effort to be relatively worthy as a woman, right? And I'm conditioned
Mhm.
that way. How can I offer a sense of self and identity to my daughter? I can't. And this is
Mhm.
not just the weight of the mother. This is the weight of the construct in which the social dynamic in which we live as a society, as well as our men
Absolutely.
carry some of the weight as well, right?
Mhm.
And so because our mothers have been enduring a lot of pain and trauma and trying to carry it on and take care of their children. And so it's really important that as parents that we get back to a state of healthy. I do what I do. I just had this really emotional conversation with my mother. I was crying right before the show. I think Allah just had it. And I say, I do
Oh.
everything I do for our mothers because I grew up in community and I saw our mothers endure and they dealt with a lot of pain and they were the landing places for a lot of stuff because there wasn't a lot of awareness. What it means to be a Muslim wife was a little fuzzy, right? So they endured a lot and they did it for their kids, right? Perhaps there were some mistakes. Perhaps they didn't give us all the things we needed, but they sacrificed and annihilated themselves for us. And so I do this work when I talk about healthy versus unhealthy, and I keep all of us accountable for our mothers.
Right, right. And you bring up such a great point about where the landing, place of pain. But I've even noticed now in our society, it's even glorified that unless a woman is validated because she has stuck with abuse, and they call them my ride or die chick. And it's
Yep.
almost like as if though she doesn't get glory, or not, I wouldn't say glory, that's not the right word, but she's not validated as a good wife
Not
unless she
worthy.
has tolerated constant cheating, abuse, and stuck with it anyway.
Right.
And so we have daughters that are watching this. And I'm not to say this is not to say that young men aren't watching this, but for the context of the show, we have young daughters watching. Well, you got to stay with this person, and a mother, without even saying a word, through her actions in staying in unhealthy relationship, teaches her daughter how to be unhealthy you
That
know
part.
so what would you say to the mothers who may be watching this? And again, this is not about shame. This is about that awareness, that self-awareness, because that's where growth, that's where empowerment comes from. That is where we can change, for becoming the best version of ourselves. So for some of the mothers that are watching, that might be like, oh my gosh, this is, and I'm saying this because I had that moment, in raising my teenage daughter. And there was things that I had to look at within myself and say, you know what, you got to fix that. You got to fix that. If you want to see her do better, you got to be better. So what would
Mhm.
you say to the mothers that are watching right now that might be watching a mirror and saying, whoa, this is a little deeper than what I was anticipating when I said I was going to tune in?
Of course, subhanallah, I have a lot of mothers call me really burdened, really shackled with they hear some of my lives or my shows and they kind of get into this headspace of like, oh my God, am I meeting all my kids' needs or am I exploiting my kids and what can I do to fix it?
Yeah.
And we sort of make it as though it's this big huge task. And I want to just say and affirm, first of all, it's actually a lot more simpler than we think.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never shared this before, but I had an experience, even with all my background and all my knowledge, I had an experience with my daughters where I was in a pretty unhealthy relationship right?
Mhm.
And as a result of that, and like I said, kind of taking on a responsibility as we tend to do that's not ours, right? We tend to take on other
Right.
people's burdens. People shift their stuff onto us and we carry it, and then we become really weighted down and we're unable to show up. So I wasn't really able to show up emotionally for my daughters as they needed me. And
Mhm.
what it really took, honestly, it wasn't like, oh my God, I got to put them in massive therapy and all that, which therapy is good. Therapy is good. But what I'm saying is it really just took allowing emotional space, providing a safe space. I had a tribunal once I got out of the relationship, and I sat down and I asked them to express exactly how they felt. And they told me, Mom, you made me, my eldest daughter said, Mom, you made me emotionally responsible for my younger siblings. And I don't think that
Mm,
was fair. And
mm.
I had to take that and I had to look at my daughter and I had to ask her forgiveness. And then I had to offer the forgiveness to myself. And then I had to tell my daughter that, teach my daughter that it has the fundamental right to have boundaries with me. I'm not allowed to violate her.
Like,
I'm
why are
not
you about
allowed
to
to.
make me cry?
I mean, I never shared this, but because it was such a
Yeah.
personal moment. But that is, and it really is that simplistic. It's given the
Yep.
space, you offer your forgiveness, you unshackle yourself from blame and shame, and you move forward. And you teach your daughter's boundary that you don't have the right to violate them. Nobody has the right to violate them, and that they have the fundamental right to say, "Hey, I can't be violated in that way, Mom. I love you. I respect you. Let me know how I can meet this or do this in another manner, but I can't be violated." Teach your kids
Exactly.
that so that they always have a strong sense of self. And it really isn't as complex and weighty as we want to make it seem. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you were being so transparent because I had a very similar conversation with my daughter. As I
Yeah.
mentioned,
Really?
my daughter, yeah, because I was myself in an 8-year relationship with someone who it was very toxic. And it was after, me divorcing me and their father, my children's father, my ex-husband, we got divorced. And I wasn't in a good space. I wasn't in a good emotional space. And again, that looking for attachment to camouflage the hurt. It was like, if I could just attach myself to someone else and make whatever I felt I failed in this one, if I can bring it
Mhm.
here, I can make it all right. And what I didn't realize was I needed to heal. I needed to be okay with the fact that although it didn't go the way I wanted, it didn't mean that I was a failure. We take it to that
Right.
extreme when you're not emotionally healthy. And
Right.
so the same thing, me and my daughter had this, and my daughter became like she became like my therapist.
Right.
And it wasn't her responsibility. Anytime I went through something, she was the one that was right there. And because she is an empath, I'm going to listen to Mom. And being young, she didn't have the voice. She didn't even understand that she had a voice to be able to say, Mom, this is way too much for me. And
Yes.
it took the same thing. I had to go to each of my children and ask
Mm,
them to share with me. And I'm going to say, for the viewers that are watching, that's not an easy conversation. I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy conversation, but anything that is worth, growth and transformation. When you look at a diamond, when you look at a butterfly, it goes through a really ugly period, right? But
yes.
when you're able to do the work, when you're able to be transparent with your children and say, you know what, I own that and I'm working on it, and your children can see that you're doing the work on top of asking for their forgiveness, owning your stuff, and they see Mom is making healthier decisions, Mom is not making me responsible for her emotions,
Yes.
there lies their transformation. Am I right, Sabria?
You're so right. I appreciate you for sharing that, but you're right.
Yeah.
Remember, behavior is learned, right? And so we thinking we have to do all this, like, yes, there's some things we have to intentionally teach,
Mhm.
absolutely. But for the most part, we're passing down patterns through our own behavior. So if you really want to raise healthy kids, be healthy. It really
We
is
have
that
to be
simple.
healthy.
Be
Yeah.
healthy
Yeah. And what does
because
that look like? What are healthy things that you mentioned? I've noticed you said this multiple times. You mentioned boundaries.
yeah,
Boundaries is something that is a healthy trait to have, and I have them. So what are healthy, I'm very, my children always laugh and they're like, Mom, you are not the, when they see me respond to certain things, they're like, ooh, if that was 10 years ago, you would have responded
Right.
differently. And it's true. So what does what does healthy look like in a woman? What does healthy look like as far as transferring that to her daughter?
Whoa, such a powerful question. And I want to start off with what you mentioned when you say boundaries, because they're so important. And it's my fundamental belief it is one of the secret cures to help us rectify what has been done to us and the wrongs that have been done to us as a people, Black people in particular. We were violated in the realm of our boundaries. We didn't know how to have them. We didn't think we had a right to have them. So now it's odd and weird when people tend to keep them their own selves safe, right?
Yes.
Violation, being violated and exploited is a norm. And so one of the things is that we really need to intentionally teach ourselves and teach our children. Like I said, I don't control my kids. We have boundaries. That's it. And so it's this idea of really identifying what violates your sense of self, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your sexual well-being, your financial well-being, your energy, your time, all these sort of things in which that allows you to have a great, healthy sense of self, right? And not be depleted or not have to self-sacrifice. It keeps you safe. Again, you're honoring what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you as a trust. He didn't give it to us. It's a loan. We're returning it back. So we don't have the right to
Right.
exploit it. No one else can exploit it either. And so teaching our children, first and foremost, and having this for ourselves, healthy, balanced boundaries with the people in my life, it allows for me to be able to operate in spaces with you where love and connection can exist, where I can absolutely be able to have trust, where I can feel really safe and grounded and I could be healthy. Boundaries keep people
Mm,
healthy. And so that's really very, very important. And understanding how to set healthy, loving boundaries. That's the thing. We think we're setting boundaries, but we be off the chain. We be doing all kinds of stuff. And that's not, we have to be healthy with our boundaries
right.
too. Um, and so that's a big part. Another part is just as individuals really understanding our own needs. I think that's really important that we understand. Like, if I understand that as a child I experienced a little bit of exploitation in the realm of safety, perhaps I experienced some form of abuse or something happened where I don't often feel safe, I have to understand that I am going to be seeking self safety as an adult
Mhm.
from in an unhealthy manner until I learn how to meet that need within myself. And through my
Right.
connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how am I going to keep my own self safe? How am I going to offer that to myself, right? How am I going to be really firmly rooted in my own sense of trust in myself, that I'm dependable, that I'm
Mhm.
reliable with me, right? I keep my own self
Mm,
safe. And so now I'm not looking for the unhealthy, narcissistic, toxic partner with this false sense of safety, right? I'm not doing that. I'm not modeling that for my
absolutely.
children for only for them to repeat. So learning how to take care of yourself is really healthy. Learning how to honor yourself and learning how to meet your own needs where you have a strong sense of self and you're able to sit grounded with you and you're able to sit grounded with your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So really rectifying our spiritual condition is really a big remedy,
Yes.
right? Our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate cure. So if we're not modeling that to our kids, then we're unhealthy just within that, right? And then from that point,
Absolutely.
giving ourselves some, like I said, parameters and making sure that we have a strong sense of self through meeting our own primal needs if they're unmet within us.
And it's so true what you said. My transformation happened when I took my Shahada. That was when, in realizing how, not through my, limited lens of self, was how does
Mm-hmm.
Allah look at me? And that
Yeah,
opened up the door to a lot of my healing, a lot of, not needing to be validated. It was more of, I care about how Allah sees me. And that
isn't that
was
so
the
freeing?
game changer for me. You you
That's completely
you mentioned
liberating,
about,
right?
yes. Oh my gosh. I'm like I said, I'm completely different person. And as you mentioned, I have boundaries. I have boundaries, and my boundaries, I stick to my boundaries. I honor that. This is my
Yeah.
boundary. And if you cross it, and I'm not I'll let you know when you're crossing my boundaries to give you an opportunity to understand. Maybe you didn't get it, maybe you didn't know, but now you know. And if you continue to do that, then I'm going to protect myself and no longer, deal with that. I'll make dua for
Mhm.
you, I pray for you, but over there. That's just how I
Right.
roll.
Right.
There's another thing that I want to just quickly, as in the context of what we're talking about, which is transferring healthiness to our daughters. I think a lot of things that, we always have that, who we surround ourselves with, and
Yeah.
even in our religion, in the religion of Islam, when we're talking about our companions, our friends, our homies, our girls, our, who we hang out with, sometimes that plays a role because you got that, and it's not always the biological auntie, but it's the auntie that your mother grew up with, and she's crazy and she, wild, wilding out all the time, and that's who our daughters see us associating with. Do you feel that that plays into how our daughters choose friends, companions, and who they measure their accountability with? Who's their source of
Sure.
holding a standard?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I do often with my clients very early on in their process is we tend to look at learned behavior patterns from our primary caregivers, right? And so one of the big areas we look at is friendships and
Yeah.
relationships and the people that were in our parents' lives. So if mom really had unhealthy people around, unhealthy relationships within her life, or she had um inappropriate relationships, or sometimes people are really unhealthy with their friendships, then that tends to be what I tend to see as a coach, is that tends to be a repeated pattern. A child either kind of takes it from mom or dad, or they have a mix of it, or they do the extreme opposite, which is also an extreme, which is usually unhealthy. Any extreme is unhealthy, of what their parents did, because maybe they really saw or felt the brunt of the dysfunction. And so definitely the people and company that we keep, I always say the company that we keep, even people we end up in intimate relationships with, there's a spiritual realm to that. That's why the dean informs us about that, because there's a spiritual, we really, energy is transferable, as we know. And as if I'm in your space and you're in my space, and one of us doesn't have a good condition in the heart, there's an element of spiritual transfer that's happening. I'm impacted a little bit
Mhm,
spiritually the more and more I'm
mhm,
around someone who doesn't is not in a good state or good condition. And that's why toxic relationships and people who are toxic and have these dark hearts, I'm sorry, it's not worth it, because I have to face a law. So I can't sacrifice my spiritual well-being by constantly laying down with you every single night. And so
exactly.
yeah, but absolutely, it's really important. And like I said, in modeling good friends, allowing your children to choose good friends. I again don't operate in the realm of control with my kids. So I have a teenage daughter, and she has really had a bumpy road with friends, but I allow her to make
Mhm,
these sort of bumps. I'm right there to provide her with some guidance. I don't control it, and she tends to navigate, and she understands, and then she learns, oh, I can't be around the gossipers, or I can't be, but she's kind of falling and making those little mistakes, and then it becomes a
mhm.
real thought pattern and behavioral pattern that she's creating for her own life, opposed to mom told me not to do it.
Exactly. And I
That's
think that's the foundation that you lay for your children, is what they see. So as they
Yep.
go out and start navigating who they're going to be friends with, who they're going to be in an intimate relationship with, it really lies with that foundation. It,
Yep.
it lies with, who did mom and dad choose as companions. And we brought up briefly about the father, and it's not a small thing when it comes to our young girls, and it's a two-way thing. Sometimes, parents just, they don't work out for whatever the reason
Mhm.
is. I would love for you to speak to the fathers who may be watching, because men do watch the conversations with Asia. So if we have fathers on here that are watching, what would you say to that father who has a daughter that, it didn't work out with the mother? What would you say as far as for him to incorporate some healthiness in his daughter? What are some things that he needs to keep in mind as it relates to what he's transferring to his daughter?
Absolutely. That's very important. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again because it's important, the father teaches the daughter to receive. So, what are you offering your daughter? What is she receiving from you? Because you're the first model of that. Based on that first foundation of a relationship, it sets the foundation for what she expects, believes she's worthy of receiving from men for the rest of her life. unless she does some intentional shifting. So if I am a father and I'm showing up and I'm inconsistent, right, or I'm not there all the time, I am absolutely setting the foundation that men are inconsistent, and you should expect to receive iotas of love or inconsistent love and presence and validation and all
Breadcrumbs.
that
Yeah,
breadcrumbs from men.
breadcrumbs of love. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I'm doing, right? Or if I completely overindulge my daughter, which we see that to the other extreme, right? And I'm absolutely, just pouring in daddy's girl to the ultimate extreme, I'm also sort of modeling to my daughter that she's expected to just be completely indulged, right? She's just a receiver. Remember, we're receivers, but we're not takers. We're receivers.
And
What
it
do we
has
do?
to be a balance. It has everything in balance. My mother
Everything
always
is
used to
in
say,
there
yeah,
in
my
order so
mother
we know.
used to say, I'm sorry, go ahead,
No,
Sabria.
no, I'm done. Go ahead.
My mother always used to say, too much of anything is not good for anyone. And it really is the truth. And there's the other piece to that, for the mothers that are watching, um, one of the things that I emphasized with my children was, and I would emphasize to certain friends, who was, well, you should do this with with their father. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I chose him. And no matter what our relationship is or isn't, he is always going to be my children's father. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I didn't do was bash my children's father when they were growing up. I encouraged them to have a relationship and still do. And he has changed, and he has showed some really positive, strides towards his children. And it's I just want to share this. I had a conversation with a former student, and
Hmm.
right now, that is the journey that she is on. She actually is reconnecting with her father, and she's grown. She's graduated high school. She's a grown woman. But one of the reasons why she was open to the concept, although he wasn't physically there all the time and there was some level of disappointment, is because her mother didn't bash him. And so when the opportunity and when Allah decreed that this is the time for this to happen, her heart was more open to it because she didn't have all of these negative stories that had nothing to do with her. So I
Yeah,
just would, that's another aspect of raising, that there's, we can trust, and let your child develop trust factors with boundaries, with standards, with the healthy aspects of, um, deciphering and having some discernment of what's good and what's not healthy, for you.
absolutely.
So
I love that you said that. I love that you said that because I think that's important as a point of accountability, especially when you talk about us as moms and the things that didn't work out with dad and what we're modeling through that. And sometimes we pour our own pain and we make our children the carriers of our own pain
yeah,
and
yeah,
animosity, and that's completely unloving and unhealthy. And the
yeah,
children tend to take on the responsibility and the weight of that. And so
yeah,
um, that's a very real challenge, especially if you
yeah,
any breakdown between a daughter and her father. The daughter's sense of femininity again is going to be um, affected. It's going to be
yeah,
affected. She's going to struggle in the realm of femininity in the absence of that, with that breakdown between her and dad. And femininity is a core part of our identity. Like it's
of
a
our
core
being,
part,
right?
right? And so it's
Absolutely.
really vital to understand that.
So to wrap up what we're discussing, just bullet point. What again, for those that are watching, and we have, well, let me get to some of the comments on here that we have with some of the audience here. Um, One of them said, the cycle continues. And then she wrote, I've done this and it makes a huge difference, meaning owning. When we were talking about owning and having to have that conversation with our daughters and letting them know, while mom had a responsibility because of my unmet trauma or unhealed trauma, I ask for your forgiveness. You know what I mean? That's such an important
Yeah.
conversation to have. And then one chaplain Rafael Lantigua, he said, thank you very much for addressing the very real problem of some mothers having a negative impact upon a daughter's relationship with her father. Mashallah, he just wrote that. Um, Another sister, when we were talking about how we have those negative labels, that if a woman just continues to embrace abuse, she's a ride or die, as if though that's a glorified behavior. And a sister, Seisha, she wrote, I saw that being said about Snoop Dogg's wife, and I said the same thing. So our daughters are
Yeah.
watching not only internally what's happening in the home, but even from a societal aspect, we're seeing from social media, TV, all of the, this is what is labeled as a good woman is enduring abuse.
And it needs to
And
be
it's not.
thrown, and it needs to be thrown in the garbage. And I say this all the time, is nothing is going to change until we change. If we're sitting around
Yes,
waiting for someone else to, or for other people to wake up and, and stop the cycles of abuse, no, it stops right here and right now. And ride or die, that concept and that era, it is over. It's over. And again, it's only going to
it does.
happen if we make an intentional shift around that. And again, that's something
Yeah,
you have to intentionally teach your daughters and develop that strong sense of self, and that their identity matters, that their boundaries matter. No one has a right to violate you. Point blank, period. I don't care if it's your
absolutely.
mama, your papa, I don't care who it is. No one has a right to violate you. Point blank, period.
Love it. Love it. So, just to recap for those that are watching, maybe those that are just tuning in, what are some of the signs? Well, let's start with the beginning as you did. What are some of the signs that a child developing unhealthy habits before they even reach a teenager? Just bullet point. What are some of those things that can lead to that at an older age?
Yeah, so I mentioned that this idea of like having these unmet needs in the realm of survival, safety, belonging, and esteem. And what that looks like, we understand survival and safety, belonging is connection, validation, authenticating your kids, allowing them to be seen and heard, as well as esteem. I'm developing their sense of self esteem, their self identity, their sense of autonomy, and their self worth. And so again, that is, if those are unmet needs due to some trauma, some pain, some dysfunction in the home, just understand that you may see some self protecting behaviors or some unhealthy behaviors in your children that you may have to support them through. Other things you want to definitely look out for is any behaviors that are compulsive or on the extreme. So if you see someone who is super sexually promiscuous, for example, or super compulsively compliant, anything that operates in the realm of extremes is unhealthy and needs some support around. And I
Mm-hmm.
really strongly encourage people to put their children in therapy, look into behavioral therapists. It's definitely a new field out there, so it's not as easy, but look into like therapists, allow a space for your children to feel like they can emote and express, so you absolutely understand what they're dealing with and what they're
Mm-hmm.
going through. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
those
And
are
I
some of the
just want to
signs.
mention there was, like when I had mentioned earlier, there. Oh, we have Andola is joining us, and we're getting ready to close. Oh, mashallah.
I
That's
know.
Sorry, you guys.
okay. I know
Are
you
you
wasn't
okay?
able to.
I'm sorry.
Are you okay?
I am. My car died. Alhamdulillah, it was just a battery, but it took the other car about 30 minutes to charge my car. So
Oh, wow.
we had to get new jumper cables and everything, but nobody is in any danger. Everybody's good. I'm so sorry I
Oh,
missed it.
no, do not apologize. As I mentioned to you when you reached out to me, I said we plan, and Allah is the best of planners. Don't you worry about us. So
I'm
we're
so
good. I
looking
just wanted
forward
to
to
make sure
this.
you was okay. So no, we're good. So just to kind of chime in on the conversation, I was just mentioning really quickly. Sometimes, and I wanted to just kind of reiterate this because when I was younger and I was called boy crazy, that doesn't necessarily mean that your child is sleeping with someone. Sometimes they're just attaching themselves to the opposite sex because they're either looking for validation that they're not getting, either because the father is absent or because they didn't get the affirmations when they were younger. So sometimes it's just that wanting that affirmation from the opposite sex to just make them feel better. So, Andola, I just want to, we were just kind of wrapping up. So we was just mentioning some of those signs that we see in teenage girls, that because of unmet things when they were younger, it is now being manifest as they're older. So Sabria, if you could just recap what you said, and Andola, Andola is raising some amazing daughters. I'm talking
She's got
about daughters who are
both.
business owners,
You know what I mean?
entrepreneurs, running it. Okay, so and I know that's not an easy job. So what are some of the things that, if you could recap, Sabria? just
I
some
don't
of those
mind
unhealthy.
recapping, but I would love to say I would love to hear Indola's tips on raising healthy, balanced
Oh,
girls. Because
we
as you
getting to
mentioned,
that.
I think she has that right.
We're
Okay, I
definitely
definitely
getting to
want to
that.
hear.
I
Okay.
just wanted to recap what we were saying. So what some of those unhealthy signs were of what is unmet. And then I'm going to get to Andola, because I think Andola is the contrary, and then a lot of women who didn't know what that looks like because maybe they didn't have a mom, Andola can give some really good tips. So if you could just recap what you were saying, Sabria.
Yeah, really quickly, I was stating in Dola that a lot of times if our children or our girls experience, they have their needs, or their primal needs are unmet in the realm of survival, in the realm of safety, in the realm of belonging, in the realm of esteem. A lot of times they can, what they'll do is they'll create sort of survival or coping behaviors around these sort of unmet needs or these early experiences of pain or exploitation. And they can tend to look like I said, extreme behaviors, compulsive behaviors, whether it's compulsive compliance, I'm compliant, I'm people pleasing, I'm fawning, right? Or I'm on the other extreme where I am like, I have this really kind of overt sort of behavior, maybe being really promiscuous or being really aggressive. We see a lot of girls really aggressive in their teenage years.
Yes.
I deal with that in my profession. This anger, this sort of anger that's been suppressed from their early pain and is kind of like just pouring out. And so that's sort of some of the behaviors you see, but they always operate in the space of extremes when they are unhealthy. And so that's my recap.
Good. And I love it because this allows, us to really, and this is all what it is, for the believer, for the one who wants good and intentional about what they're doing, they reflect. And this is reason why we have this conversation. So Andola, I would like to ask you, I've watched you and your husband, Brother Ayub, I've watched the two of you raise your beautiful daughters. And from what it looks like to me, from just the outside looking in, is that it's an intentional thing that you and your husband have made a conscious decision to say, this is how we're going to raise our daughters. Can you speak to that?
It's exactly right. We sat down. I don't even know if we had Aziza, our oldest, who is now 14, which is crazy to me that I have a 14-year-old, but I may have been pregnant. Well, I had to be pregnant with her because I got pregnant quickly. She was born just after our first anniversary. So, we've been parents almost the entire time that we've been married. And we would have like these business meetings, but it was like marriage meeting, parent meeting, whatever the thing is. And it would be explicitly about either parenting stuff or household stuff or marriage stuff. And it would be like, we kind of have to touch bases on what's going on, what are we missing. When was the last time we just talked and we weren't talking about business? Let's just us talk, that kind of thing. And by the time Aziza was 4, no, she was 5 because I was pregnant with our third child, I started a school. And so a part of that was because the school that I actually was one of Sabria's coworkers at the time closed. And I didn't have another option right off the top of my head. Like, where can I send Z and our second Jalila? Where can I send them and trust they'll be fine? Because now I'm about to be on maternity leave. And so I got the bright idea to start a school. And so I started that school, and I found by the end of the first year, I felt a little out of my element in terms of really knowing what to expect of the children. And so I started to informally study like child psychiatry development, like how the brain develops, boys versus girls. Because I only have daughters.
What we were talking about earlier.
They're so different. They're so different. And I found that a lot of my expectations for boys were actually not true. Boys are very emotional, very sensitive, very just different than I expected. And my girls were very different than I expected. And I was like, why is this so different? I said, I'm more of a kind of scientific learner. Like, I like to study things and then do like my field research kind of thing. So I started studying like child development, and that led into my curriculum development because I was unsatisfied with the curriculum from state of Georgia, state of Florida, state of everywhere. So I started working on developing my own curriculum, studying childhood development, and then just really getting attached to my students. Them just becoming a part of my family along the way, and just learning from them and from their parents, And then having these meetings with our youth, it would be like, oh, I thought we would do this with the girls, but these parents do this, and this is how that's turning out. So let's do that.
So
that
can you speak to that? Can you speak to that? Because we may have some that are watching right now. We have a nice viewers, a number of viewers that are watching. For some of those that may be watching that didn't have what you have, what you were just speaking of.
Yeah.
I remember watching that. I remember watching my parents do the same thing. They would go in the room and it was like, don't disturb us. They were having their conversation. We couldn't hear anything, but it was their time, right? So if you could speak to those who may have never seen what that looks like and that dialogue, that intentional dialogue of parenting. What were some of the things that you and IU came up with that you were like, this is what we're going to do as far as our parenting of young girls in particular, to ensure as much as you can that they were healthy?
So one thing that has been major for us is Ayub and I went to premarital counseling, and we did, was it 6 sessions? We did whatever the required amount was. And during our counseling, shout out to Imam Nadim, the Western Master, he and his wife were very instrumental in my marriage and in my life at this point. His wife was the one who got the idea to introduce us in the first place. And then he was the one that did our counseling. And so one of the things that Imam Nadim was really, really like a stickler for with us was our communication style when we disagreed. At that point, we never had a disagreement. Like we were, peaches and cream. I'm 22, he's 23. We're so in love. Everything is great. And he was like, yeah, but it won't always be that way. And what will you do then? And I remember I was very naive in thinking that was not going to come because we're just so compatible. We don't really need to do this, was my thought. I don't know if I said it to him, but that's what I thought. And he really, really pushed me and said, no. What do you do when you're upset? What do you do when you're disappointed? What do you do? And I had to think about it because I really didn't know. And I had to do the same thing. And we learned that when I'm upset, I like to retreat and be quiet and reflect for a while and think through some things. When Ayub is upset, he wants to talk right away. When I'm really mad, my mouth is going. I'm just, When he's really mad, he's silent. And Brother Nadim made sure we knew not to mistake our communication styles for one another. So when I'm retreating, it doesn't mean that I'm fuming the way that he would be when he retreats. And when I'm ready to talk, when he's ready to talk, it doesn't mean that he's fuming the way that I would be when I'm ready to talk. So that one thing really showed us a way of thinking about each other and about communicating. And we go back to it all the time. Like, remember when we did that premarital counseling? So to bring up his wife, before we got married, she said, I want to tell you something that nobody ever told me. I didn't think it was okay. It wasn't, popular, but I did it. I parented my children for who they were, even when people didn't like it. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. And she said, I'll give you an example. One of my daughters talks a lot. She talks all the time, nonstop talking. If I tell her to do something, she's going to have something to say, but that's her personality. So she doesn't get punished for being who she is. When she's quiet, she's being defiant. And she's trying to think of a way to defy. Another daughter is very quiet. She doesn't say much. She keeps things,
close to the chest.
Very, very close. So when I tell her to do something, if she talks, she's being defiant. And so sometimes that quiet daughter would be like, well, why does she get to talk? Like, it has nothing to do with you. This is her situation. This is her lesson. And
those boundaries.
My quiet daughter, and now this daughter that talks all the time is being quiet. It's like, well, she gets to be quiet. Why don't I get to be quiet? That has nothing to do with you. This is about her and who she is, and so forth and so on, because they have 5 children. So now I have 3, and my children, they couldn't be more different in terms of their personality and their strengths and their weaknesses and their all of their traits. And I remember seeing it very early, like, oh, wow, this one does this and that one does that. I have to make sure I keep that in mind in terms of how I discipline them and engage them, period, because I don't want to have a one way that's detrimental for one and beneficial for the other one. And
so it's not a one size fit all.
It's not. And it changes all the time because they change all the time. And so I remember I was really struggling with it one day, and I made this Facebook post, like, parenting is so difficult to navigate between who you want to be as a parent and who your children need you to be as a parent. I don't get to be the parent I want to be. I have to be the parent they need me to be.
They need you to be.
I have to be who they need me to be. I am a very govern yourself, be responsible, live life. Don't step on nobody's toes. Just, hands off. My children, they're children. They need structure. They need boundaries. They need things. So I can't just step back and let them figure it out. That's irresponsible. That's not what they need. And every single one of them has a different set of needs. My oldest is the extrovert of extroverts.
Yes, she is.
Oh, she is in there. My second one, she needs this many people in her life. That's it. She does not need people. She needs her siblings, her parents, and one friend, maybe two. After two, she's in the corner somewhere trying to figure out how to reassess. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're so different. And so I even have to remind them, when my middle one will say to the oldest, like, why are you being so? I'm like, well, that's who she is. She's not being extra. She's being herself.
So if I'm hearing you,
she's quiet,
Right,
I'm sorry,
right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, is what you're saying is that you respect and just like our Lord and our Creator meets us where we are, it seems like you and Ayub's parenting, and you have taken that, to heart, where I'm going to meet my children where they are, not try to make them something, but just and respect the fact that they are different, and parent each one differently as they need. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very much that, and it's also getting to know, letting them show us who they are. A lot of parents try to make their children who they want their children to be. And there's some of that, you want your child to be mannerable, you want them to be hygienic, but in terms of like the important stuff, I think a lot of parents do that. We take how we were parented, what we felt was missing for us, what we wish we had, we put that on our kids. And it jams up everybody. Like, nobody gets their needs met when it's coming from the wrong place. And so my daughters, they get annoyed sometimes, like, why are you paying so much attention to us? I'm like, because I have to. Because that's how I'll know you, and I'll know if I should be concerned about this thing, or if I should be happy about this thing, or if
So you're observant.
I spend too much time paying attention to my kids, and as they get older, they change. So it's like, even something as simple as, like, I know there are jokes that go around like, your kids like bananas until you buy 10 bananas. Now nobody likes bananas. They do that kind of thing happens with every part of their life. They're so dynamic, and then that whole concept of like parenting in the sevens, the play years, then the discipline years, then the advisement years. I have a child in each of those sets, right? My baby is 8 now, so she's officially in her discipline years, but she was 7, so I had a play child, a discipline child, and an advising child. And being very clear with them about those levels and what it means, and what expectations, what's expected, what they're responsible for. And we taught them that they're responsible for themselves, and we're responsible to them. Because a lot of times people grow up and all of a sudden you expect them to be able to be this whole person and do all this stuff, and they've never been responsible for anything.
Right. I want to ask both of you a question, because this is something that I do with both, male and female, but in particular with my daughter. What are some specific things? And this is really we talked about what unhealthy looks like, but I want us to, in talking about raising healthy teenage daughters, both of you, I think, can contribute to this. What are some of the activities that you do in particular with your daughters to have open dialogue, to have them feel safe, to be able to share with you and what are some things? So I'll go back to you, Sabria, and because we're going to be closing soon. Sabria, what are some of the things that you particularly do with your daughter to create that healthiness in their life? What does healthy look like? What are some things that you particularly do with your daughters?
So we created a culture of like the sort of round table, sort of weekly protocol that we have, and which we all sort of come to the table. We all kind of take notes and notate what we want to bring to the table as it relates to concerns, issues, celebrations. and everybody has that free space. And then we kind of intentionally teach. I tried to intentionally teach, and we all kind of model within ourselves of offering empathy, offering validation to people's experiences. And again, my children have the absolute right in that space to speak to what injustices they think may have occurred during that week with me, and what oversights are overlooked. So I just make that an intentional time, and that's the best way, because as you guys know, I juggle so many things. I have to make an intentional time around that, where they are able to emote and express and get everything out, and we're able to kind of shift the week based on that feedback.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. And Dola, what are some of the things that you particularly do, or you and Ayub do, that is very intentional to, that creating, wanting to raise healthy young ladies?
Well, what we're gonna start doing is what Sabria just said. You're
like, I like that. I'm gonna take that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. We don't do anything that regular, like weekly, which I think is really, we need to implement something that regularly. But IU, by age, I want to say maybe 7 or 8, he started taking them on dates. And he would do the whole date thing. He's opening their door, he's pulling out their chair, he's doing the whole thing. And so that definitely was.
Give it up for Brother Ayub.
Yeah,
give it up.
But sometimes it'll be a group date with all of them. Sometimes it'll be one-on-one. COVID definitely interrupted their dates, and so it's been a little bit tricky trying to figure it out in the last couple of years. But before COVID, it was fairly regular. They would go on dates like, oh, mommy's not invited. This is daddy-daughter time. I'm like, it sure is. Y'all go get that daddy-daughter time. So that was a really big one, because like I came in on you guys talking about that paternal validation and that fatherly. So it was, so on one side it was that they would, dress nicely, and he's, giving the compliments and all of that kind of thing. But then also talk with them about, what should y'all expect and what should you not be impressed by? Some guy is interested in opening the door. That's not impressive. That's basic. He's being kind and he's flat. We're not impressed by flattery. Our face, we have no control over this face. Allah gave us this face. Can he compliment your character? Does he have good character? Is he kind to his mother? These bigger things, like how does he treat his sisters? So that was his thing with them without me. So sometimes I don't get told about the conversations, which of course is fine. But sometimes they would come back all excited, like, oh, we talked about this and we got hibachi and we got, whatever. They usually like food. But the conversations as they got older became less to share with mommy. That was daddy time. For me, I would do one-on-one things with them based on their interests. So like Aziza's an artist. She likes to sing. So we might sit down and draw together and just let her talk. Jalila she has all kinds of interests, honestly. She likes to cook, she likes to bake, so maybe we'll cook together, or we'll try some new recipes together. Soraya likes to read, and she likes to just kind of be close to you.
That's her love language.
She just wants to be right. Matter of fact, I'm surprised she's not in the room right now. She wants to be close, and so if she's near, she's touching. So if I kind of push her away, she's still real rejected. And I learned that about her. Sometimes I'm like, mommy just doesn't want to be touched. And she's like, but I just want to touch you. I'm like, okay, I gotta suck it up for you right now. So if she's close and we're watching a movie or reading a book or something, that's really all she really wants. And so as they got older and I was trying to keep the paths of communication open, I created an email. It was like Mama Shakur 123 or something. And I was like, if there's something that, you need to discuss with me, but you can't tell me, email me. And so they'll sometimes, because, sometimes it's easier to write than to talk.
Yeah.
And so we haven't used it in the last few months, actually, but for a little while, they would email me stuff. Like it may have been something they were excited about, something that happened that they were essentially confessing, but didn't want to say. And alhamdulillah, it's not, not crazy stuff. I really do have very well-behaved children, but it was one of the things that I shared with them was I can't ever guarantee them a lack of consequences of things they do, but I can promise you no punishment. Like this is a free space. I can't even tell you no judgment because I might have an opinion about this. Like I would be lying if I said, oh, no judgment, just say anything. no, I'm still your mom. I still have my own morals and values, and I might be like, oh no, I don't like that. That wasn't. Mm-mm. But I'm not going to give you a punishment, or like I might not reprimand you in this space here. But there may be a consequence to something that you did, because that's not in my control. And so even just having those conversations with them, giving them that free space to talk or to write it, because it usually turns into writing. They would write their stuff down, and then we talk about it, and always end in hugs if it was a tough conversation. If they don't want to, I'm like, nope, we got a hug. And so if they don't want to, they'll just stand there like this, and I'll just squeeze them until they relax and then hug me back. So it definitely makes the conversations end well when they're more difficult. And then the ones that are easy and fun is just like, that little icing on the cake conversation. So, but we don't do anything regular like what Sabria's talking about. I really like that. So I think we should
busy. It's just because Sabria is a psychopath with her time. So I got everything got to be.
Well, I would have to agree with you. My father did the same thing Brother Ayub does with his daughters. I mean, my dad, I always waited for Fridays, because Fridays was paydays for my dad. And it was Fridays. I would wait for the phone call when my mom would be like, get dressed, your dad's taking you out. And I looked forward, like, my father, mashallah, he's no longer here in the physical, but those memories is what I still hold on to. It's those things that, in me reconnecting with my creator, with Allah, it was those things that became so much more important, because my dad, in just spending time with me and the things he did, which was opening up the car door and letting me know that I was so special to him, that was important. So I'm imploring to the fathers that are watching, it's impactful. Don't think that those, just taking them to get ice cream, I guarantee you those are memories that daughter will never forget. And how you treat her is, and the words that you impart into your daughter are the words that she is going to think of as herself. That is how she's going to validate herself and her identity, as her femininity, as you was mentioning. One of the things that I did with my daughter was I did the one-on-ones, because she had brothers. So she's always with the boys, with her brothers, and she needed that mommy daughter time. And so I spent a lot of time with my daughter. I took her places, things that she liked to do. I let her explore things that I didn't participate in as a child, but it was things that she was interested in, and I supported that. I supported the things that she liked. And one of the things that we did was, every year we did a vision board, and we would share each other's vision. So that way I could see where her mind was going, what she was thinking, how it was developing, and how can I support that. Vision boards are fun. So if you have daughters and you want to know what's on their mind, what are their aspirations, what are they aspiring to do and be, that's a great way to do it without feeling like this pressure. It's just allowing them to have a good time while, expressing to themselves what they want to do. So these are just some of the ideas of raising healthy daughters and being able to support. And as you mentioned, Sabria, giving that safe space. Yes. So I just want to read in closing some of the comments on here, as I've done the one-on-one with my children as well. This is so very important. The chaplain, and that was from Seisha, the chaplain Rafael Lantigua, he wrote, he said, wow, this was really a very powerful and much needed episode. What an eye opener for me as a father of a daughter. This was truly a panel of knowledgeable and experienced women. Thank you for imparting so much beneficial nuggets of wisdom. And he wrote a little bit more. So this, as you can see, this is a much needed dialogue, and this is what this is all about. And as I mentioned in the start of the show, our whole mission of Conversations with Asia, and why I started, and my intention of starting this talk show, was to empower the women of our communities and the girls that they are raising. And so as we mentioned earlier in the show, you can't give what you don't have. But this is a great way. And just because there was mistakes that may have been made in the past and things that you look back yourself and say, I wish I could have done better, as long as Allah gives you air in your lungs and allows you and restores your soul for another day, That is a day that you can fix it. You can make it right with your children. You can ask for that necessary forgiveness. You can ask Allah for forgiveness, and you can forgive yourself. Because once you forgive yourself, those shackles of shame, and it doesn't define you, and is the starting point of your decision making and how you're going to move forward. When you deal with shame, everything after it is negativity.
Yeah.
Deal with, ask for the forgiveness, believe that he is merciful. We know he is. Accept that, embrace that for yourself, and then start a new journey with your children and ask your children,
Yes.
what would a healthy relationship look like between you and me? Get their idea as well, so that way you can meet them where they are, because there may be some trust issues.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to know that now we're developing a safe space, as Sabria mentioned, and as Andola, mentioned, in creating a safe space for the children. We may have to reinvent what that looks like for our children, especially when they're at their teenage years and they're a little more, closed off. It's a beautiful way to be able to start that dialogue. So thank you so much, sisters, for coming on the show. This was just a beautiful conversation. We've actually been on here longer than I've ever been, and it's an hour and 25 minutes, but it's just nuggets. And this is more of the dialogue that we need to have, not just identifying the problem, but giving solutions. What does that look like? Giving ideas, because some of us, hurt people, and it may not even be intentional. It's just because that's all we know, right? So this was a beautiful conversation. I want to thank you so much. If anyone just tuned in, please follow Sabria Mills. She has a podcast called the Dope Muslim Woman Podcast. She has a cohort that is going to be beginning. If you could just tell them real quick when it's going to begin and what it's called, so that way if they want to start on this journey of self-healing, so they can impart that and transfer that to their daughters. What you got going on, sis?
Thank you so much. I have two things upcoming. I have my From Heartbreak to Dope cohort, and this is an intentional cohort for 8 weeks to help people move from the journey of, unhealthy to healthy, heartbreak to dope, this concept of coming into self-actualization. That starts very soon, within 2 weeks. It's on my link tree if anybody wants to look me up. In addition to that, I have Boundaries Bootcamp, which is really important. I really encourage mothers to join Boundaries Bootcamp, because it's the new way in which we want to be intentional with our children. Instead of this idea of discipline and all these punishments and such, teach your children boundaries, because it's the life skill they need in order to keep themselves safe and navigate relationships. So Boundaries Bootcamp starts on February 27th. It's a 2-week intensive workshop. Thank you so much.
And
it was
how
an
can
honor.
They sign up? How can
Okay,
they
so you
sign
can
up?
Yes, you can sign up. There's a link on my link tree. I think it's linktree/Dope Muslim Woman. And just go to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast off of Facebook. Our link tree is right there in the bio. You can click there. Both registration links are the top two under that link tree account. I wish I had that. I wish I could drop it, but I don't have it right here.
Oh, that's okay. Well, follow her. Go on Instagram under the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, or Sabria Mills. And trust me, you will get all the info, all the upcoming beautiful things that she has. 2000, whatever didn't happen, this is a new day. 2022, let's get it. Andola, you are running a beautiful business with your daughters. I mean, it's called Jazz Crafted. Please tell the audience what you do with your daughters. Again, imparting entrepreneurship, healthy, things for your daughters, creating generational wealth. Tell the audience about, what the company is about and where they can find you to support our healthy girls.
Okay, so Jazz is a business that my daughters founded 3 years ago when they were 10, 8, and 5. And Jazz is an acronym for their names, Jalila, Aziza, and Sarah. And so they're the founders of the business. I've become CEO, but they still get to run their business. But Jazz is it's a kidpreneur-powered skincare and beauty business that seeks to inspire others to make healthy choices, pursue their dreams, and look good doing it. And so they have handcrafted skincare and beauty products, from body buttercream to body polish. There's a lip polish. There's body bars, which is like different types of soap. And what am I forgetting? A bath soak is one of them sitting right here looking at me like, wait, you
get it together, Mom. Let's come on with it, right? Get that pitch together. Where can they find you if they want to purchase any of their products and support? Where can they find it and be able to purchase those items?
So their website is jazzcrafted.com. It's JAS crafted.com. But they also have TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And so their site is connected to all 3 of those platforms, and they have their website connected there. And then you can also just buy straight through the IG or Facebook marketplace. And it's really amazing seeing them do it. They've been doing it for 3.5 years now. It branched out Aziz's entrepreneurial journey as a fashion designer. She started designing clothes and did 5 fashion shows when she was 10. And the other 2 wanted to be a part of that. And so now they do that together. And it's something that we've talked about, them writing their own little kidpreneur journey book. So
yes,
if I can get them to do it,
we're gonna that's right.
Can I just say I'm a firm. I use the products all the time, and so I'm a this is a customer testimonial. Yes, I use the products. Phenomenal. I don't want anything else in my body. Very good product.
Jazz is an official sponsor of the Dope Muslim Women podcast for 2022.
So you see, these are
jazz. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. So you see, mothers supporting your daughter's visions, and like I said, that vision board, supporting your daughter's vision. Letting them know that it's a journey, but I'm here for you. I'm here with you. I'm here for it. These are all of the things that contribute to creating a healthy teenage daughter, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the show. Thank our guests, Sabria and Nandola, for taking time out of their busy schedules with their family. We so appreciate it. If anyone just chimed in and just heard the tail end of it, you can watch the replay. We are here live on Facebook. You can watch the replay, but you can also go to our YouTube channel under Asia Nasir Shaheed. Subscribe to the channel so that way you can watch all of the wonderful episodes that we've had in the past, and hit that notification bell. So as we have new shows coming up every 2 weeks, you'll be notified and you won't miss it, because in our busy schedules and raising healthy daughters, sometimes we might forget. So we need that little nudge sometimes. So hit that notification bell again in our YouTube channel under Asia Nasir Shaheed. Thank you once again for supporting our show. We truly, I appreciate it so much. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you again for the next episode of Conversations with Asia in 2 weeks. Take care and enjoy the rest of your night. Bye, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.